Hi, it's Tiffany Lorraine Galloway, certified high performance coach, with another episode of the Resilient Mother podcast. We have a new theme for you today. It's having a resilient intuition. And I have Dr. Jodi here with me, and we're going to take a view on this from anxiety, tuition, self-trust, and how you can build that in yourself and in your kids, especially your teens. Hey, listen up. I got teenagers, so I'm excited to learn what we are going to discuss in this episode today. Jodi, thank you so much for being here. Can you please tell us a little more about you?
Sure. Yeah. I've been a psychotherapist for 26 years. I've been working with kids, teens, adults, families. And so I really have this unique view of the changes we've seen in this new generation and why. The lack of resilience, even in the increased number of skills that people have, it's an idea that they aren't resilient instead of a true not resilience. And so I feel like our job as parents, as practitioners, as educators is really to reflect back the resilience that kids have. So I'm really excited to be here and talk about that today.
Well, on that subject, what does resilience mean for you, or how would you define it?
I think it means like knowing that whatever happens, you can figure it out, that you're adaptable, you're a problem solver. And so it's a self-trust. It's really a relationship with yourself that I can do it.
What would be a good way to start that for our children from a young age?
I think
Giving
one of the
them
best things as a parent you could do is point out your kids' skills. So you're going to reflect back their skills, but very particular. It's not like you did a great job. It's like, oh, you thought of that idea. And that was an interesting idea. No one else had thought about that idea. And you had this idea to do this, or you figured out, you solved the problem. You thought of something that nobody else thought of, or you noticed when I was sad and you asked me if I was sad. So really pointing out with specificity is like their actual the actual skill that they did. So they start to learn about themselves as having these unique skills.
And every child is unique, so that will be different. So it's okay if it's not the same thing or the same trait. How do we
Exactly.
also allow our kids to just deal with natural consequences so that they have resilience? Where's that line between like safety boundaries, but also letting them face hard things while they're in the home so that those consequences are smaller, not larger when they go out into the real world?
Yeah, I'm really big for letting kids make their own mistakes, letting them do hard things, giving them lots of challenges. One of the first things we do to our kids when we see that they're stressed out is take things off their plate.
Mm.
And that really encourages them to lower their expectations of themselves or lower their view that they could do things that are hard or that they could do this. It validates what their anxiety is saying to them is you can't. And we don't want to validate that. We want to reflect back like you can. You
Mm.
can do it. It feels like anxiety is telling you can't, but that's like not true at all. Anxiety just doesn't, just wants to muck up your life a little bit.
So, what's your definition of anxiety?
That is a good question because I have a very unique definition of anxiety. After writing 5 books about anxiety, my latest one is this one here, Anxiety, I'm So Done With You. Um, I feel like anxiety is a leftover fear response. So the leftover adrenaline, symptoms of the adrenaline if you're not in physical danger. So the
Mm.
way I define anxiety, it is not good for anything. It's not like, oh, sometimes anxiety is good to protect you. Not the way I define it. And that's really helpful to people. Because if you're like, I like my anxiety because it helps keep me motivated, then let's call it something else. That's call it like goal, or call it something that you want, and if you call it anxiety, then you try to keep it thinking anxiety is your friend or is helpful to you. Well, it causes a lot of suffering in your life. So that's a problem.
As a certified high performance coach, that's words, and the words that we choose are huge. And we'll choose 3 words a day or the word we want to be for the year. So, why in the world would you pick a negative word to be your motivation? That doesn't make sense. There's so many other options out there,
You might
and
see it with
that
your
are
clients
uplifting.
all the time that they don't want to get rid of their anxiety because they really feel like that lie that anxiety tells that it's protecting you. They really think that's true. And so
Mm.
they don't want to get rid of it completely. They feel like they would be too vulnerable, and it's just not true.
What word would you want to counter with that, or is it unique to each individual?
I think like if you think about I have good coping skills. So I have common sense or I have good coping skills. Let's use those good words. Let's say I have good common sense that I wear a helmet on the bike, right? It's not fear that's driving that. It's common sense that's driving that. It helps us kind of, I guess, categorize fear as good or bad or helpful or not helpful. And I think that's important, not good or bad. That's hard. That's too dual, but helpful in some situations and not helpful in some situations. But anxiety itself, if we think of it as never helpful, it really gives us clarity on how to get rid of it.
Yeah. And my understanding of the brain, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a negative and a positive emotion are usually in the same place in the brain and they can't take up that same space. So if you can replace anxiety with something more positive, like I'm resourceful, I'm resilient, or something of that nature, it can wipe that out. Like fear and love can't be in the same place, anxiety and gratitude can't be in the same place. And so it's just a matter of choosing and rewiring your brain to have a different automatic response.
I love that. That's great. Really helpful. I think that's really helpful. I always say that laughter and anxiety can't use the same moment together.
Mm-mm. No.
And so if you laugh, it really loosens it up. Also, it increases your neuroplasticity, so you could really change those neural pathways to the positive. With laughter is such good medicine.
So I'm curious because I have a teenager who's developed a lot of anxiety, and
Mm.
COVID and things did not help that. So the
No.
isolation kind of changed a lot for her generation and their perception of the world. And it's hard for me to watch as a very extroverted person. So you're not be extrovert, but trying to honor that, but also find that balance between being too recluse and still being a part of the world and honoring that journey for them. But also, I'm curious what happens like as a teenager, that change, that shift. Why does anxiety spike so high?
Oh, I think there's a lot of reasons why we're seeing anxiety spiking, particularly now. I mean, it does anyway during because you're individuating. You're trying to figure out and become your own person, but you still need a little bit. And so there's kind of like a tug of war inside yourself as you're growing and individuating during those teenage years. But now we're looking at something that's completely new, that's on top of all that. And our modern world and our modern conveniences, our brain has not developed to function in a world like this. So our
Yeah.
anxiety is a regular human response to our world. And if people understood that, it would eliminate a lot of the guilt and the self-judgment that we have about our anxiety, but also it could give us a way forward out of it, because if we
Mhm.
understand why we have it, why we're responding this way to our world, phones, huge part of that, right? We're getting messages all day long that we're out of control, we're worthless, we're powerless, and that is affecting us. We're really starting to see ourselves as worthless, powerless, and out of control, but we're confused about why we are that way. Um, and so we're looking for answers, which is a total distraction and keeps us feeling more and more powerless because there's no answers to that. It's not true. It's not true, even though the message is, commercialism, random acts of violence all over the world, all of those things are giving us that message that we're powerless, we're vulnerable. And it's right in the palm of our hands 24/7. So
Yeah.
that's really impactful.
It makes things feel completely out of control. And I hear that phrase a lot. Oh, the world's out of control, or a country's out of control, or I'm out of control. And the truth is, I think the fight and the battle is to take back the idea that our inside, our intuition, our inner work, who we are on the inside, is powerful and is enough. And that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for our minds and our hearts, and not to be swayed or jaded by what we're exposed to. Because there's just as much good in the world as there is bad. The problem is people are just promoting and often the thing that gets the most likes or the thing that gets the most views instead of the really beautiful acts that are out there in the world. I think it's just a matter of making the effort to find them. There's always an opportunity to serve. There's always networks like the Children's Miracle Network, granting children their dreams in life. There's someone in your community, in your family that needs you. You can do that. There's nothing stopping you from things like that. And so if we allow all these negative emotions just to shut us down, it's a really sad thing to watch because the worst thing that could happen in this world today is for good people to do nothing.
Exactly, exactly. But we feel so powerless. We feel like our actions don't matter. We feel like we don't have any skills to take actions that would matter. And so
Mm,
it shuts us down. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because we see ourselves not able to or immobilized. And then we become more afraid or feel more powerless and helpless. And then we get more anxious. And then it's like this cycle that makes it worse and worse. And so us adults have to really reflect back to these kids, like understand why you're feeling this way instead of saying you're different, you have a mental illness. Totally not helpful.
mm-mm.
I created a curriculum for high school health teachers to stop teaching that pathologic, oh my gosh, I cannot say that word, pathological idea or that medical model of mental health. It's just not true. It
Mhm.
was an idea that you're different, you have a mental illness. Anxiety is not a mental illness. It's a regular response to our modern world. And people people are like, oh, I'm so glad that I'm editing your book on anxiety. What a coincidence. I have anxiety. I'm like, it's not a coincidence. Everybody has anxiety.
It's a response.
It's
And
a
that's the
response.
thing. We're not a
Yeah, and it's like
response, though.
you'd be weird that if you weren't having it, but that doesn't mean you have to stay there.
Mhm.
We understand. It's totally understandable about why you're feeling that way. So now people are validated. They're not like it's in your head or blah blah blah. You're different. It's like we get it. You'd be weird if you didn't feel this way, but you don't have to stay there.
And
We
the
can
thing
help
that's
you get
helped
out of
me the
it.
most with that is actually separating emotions and feelings. And I got this from Brendan Burchard, who's the ultimate high performance coach. And the way he defined this helped me separate myself from my emotions. Emotions are the biological response to everything. If you're going to have fear, if you're going to have anxiety or courage or bravery, that's all a biological response. How the feeling is the meaning you put on that emotion. And often the problem lies in the idea that you become the emotion. I feel bad, therefore I am bad. I feel good, therefore I am good. And that then can become like an addiction to seek the high of the high or the low of the lows instead of just going, oh, that's the biological response. Now, what do I want to do about it? Oh,
Yeah,
that's a natural
exactly.
response, or this is my trigger. Now I know what triggers me. How do I take my power back?
Exactly, exactly. I would use different language with that,
Mhm.
but I agree. We have these emotions. I would say emotions or feelings are the same thing, and those are thoughts. Those are meta thoughts
Mm,
about our emotions and feelings. Like we put meaning around it, and it's very important to see because different emotions they don't feel so bad until we put a meaning around them
yeah,
that makes us feel worse, so
yeah,
much worse, exponentially worse about them. And so that can make we have 100% of control about that. I mean, most of it's from what we've believed in the past or what we've experienced in the past. So you're not crazy if you put a negative meaning around it. But if you understood that you're doing that and that you could override it, because we're really talking about that reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain is having an emotional response to a situation, an appropriate, a regular human response to a situation, and then our cognitive brain feels out of control and it's like, got to get control back. And the fastest way to get control is blame somehow and
hmm,
blame someone else, blame yourself. And so that's what we quickly, to try to get it out under control again, we put meaning around that, which is quite often blame in some form or another. And
interesting.
sometimes we blame ourselves or blame somebody else. Then we fight about that because we're like, is it me? Is it them? Is it me? Is it them? And then
Oh,
that's even worse, right? We feel even
yeah.
more out of control. We're trying to get control. We feel even more out of control. And it's completely distracting from healing. So it's really important to know that we actually have a mammalian brain and we could control that meaning making, right? We could override that reptilian brain and that will make us feel differently. We'll transform those emotions into, well, they dissipate or they would get positive or whatever with that overriding of our mammalian brain. But when we feel that reptilian emotion, we think that this is the truth. This is how
Mm.
I feel, and we put all meaning around that. We think those are the truth, all the meaning that we put around, we think that's the truth, and so it sticks us in this place. But once we know that we could override it, everything changes for us, and it's very powerful.
And before we started, you talked about how the opposite of anxiety and the real battle there is trusting yourself
Yeah,
and being able to follow your intuition instead of letting that path that you just described naturally go into place because it's a little too enforced in the world today. So how could I show my children or teach my children as a mother to correct that and to take that control back?
I think first, you mentioned this as well. Like when we first started, you said I play the video, and that's our moment to ground, and that's really great and interesting. My show tonight is going to be around grounding techniques. Actually, I do a show with my daughter called Therapist Mom, and so we're going to talk about grounding techniques for the whole show tonight. But anything that brings us back to the present moment is putting us in that awareness, in that the prefrontal cortex, instead of that mammalian brain, instead of the reptilian brain. And in the mammalian brain, we have ability to witness ourselves, to zoom out, to see ourselves from a distance. And from that distance, if we could see ourselves from a distance and see how we are from a distance, we actually it calms our nervous system. So anytime you become like a witness of yourself, or you zoom out from a situation, your nervous system calms down. So your emotions calm down. And from that position, you really could understand that you get great perspective, because you're not so caught up in the chaos of the emotions, and you're able to understand what's happening. And from that distance, it's incredibly powerful. So if somebody did that grounding technique right away, or took a step back, we also call it zoom out, or take a drone approach. There's a lot of metaphors, or go on the balcony and look down, somehow get that psychic distance. We have so many knowledges. We're so adaptable. We're amazing problem solvers. Our brain has evolved for 2 million years to solve problems. So we have that all. It's just that those emotions, the chaos of it, and us trying to get back in control and getting ourselves more out of control gets in the way. But if we ground ourselves, take that step back, then our emotions go down, and we're able to tap in to this knowledge that we have. We can understand other people and why they did what they did. We understand ourselves. We could have compassion. We could see things in the view that we didn't see before. So that's like the quickest way. And then obviously you could develop that more and more, understanding other people.
Does that work the same way with trauma, or does trauma have a more needed response, or is there something that's more effective with that?
No, it's incredibly effective with trauma. Actually, that is why some people disassociate, to like get that distance out of the emotion. But this is a little bit more with more awareness, with more consciousness, doing it on purpose and having more control. Disassociation is a coping skill, or is a survival skill, but there's, it's useful in some situations, and then it's not useful in a lot of situations, but there's not necessarily like a conscious choice there. But this is a conscious choice. So you're totally in control. You're conscious of it the whole time. If you experience anything difficult, anytime, even if you ever experience something difficult, this is a 3-step process. 1 is give yourself compassion. 2 is take that step back. And then you could decide what to do after that. But first, you have to give yourself compassion, because we attach to stuff so much when we're out of control. Like, so it's like, why did this happen? Why did this happen? Is it me? Is it them? Is it me? Is it them? Right. We go right to blame, because it feels so, when something chaotic happens, like a trauma or some big event, and a trauma means like your senses are overwhelmed. And if that happens, then we immediately want to get in control. Our mind is like, got to get control of this situation. So you have to make meaning around it. That's why we make meaning right away, because we think that meaning will help us get in control. Sometimes it gets us out of control, but so we make meaning around it. And if there's that blame, then we're just distracted by that blame. But if we have self-compassion, if we recognize that, oh yeah, of course I feel bad, that's a regular response to that, I get it. So self-compassion just means, oh, I understand why I feel this way. I understand it. And immediately we don't attach. Because when we are judging ourselves for not responding well, or if it's blaming ourselves or whatever, all of that, or wondering or trying to make meaning, it's attaching to a situation, and the chaos of the emotion gets worse and worse and worse. And, could go into a panic. So if we have self-compassion, then we could take that step back, and then we could decide what to do. So yeah, it's very helpful, even in a traumatic situation. Right after the situation, first of all, you have to get safe. But this is if you are physically safe. This is the process. So it could be from a flashback, you could do this process, or it could be like after you got safe, or if you are safe, but you were, triggered by an event.
How do you first become aware of the negative response that you're having? I think sometimes people have to get pretty far along with problems, realizing it either manifests in the body or in a repeated pattern that's not serving. But that awareness is key. And the different responses that don't serve are flight, fight, fawn, or like you said, that withdrawal. But not everyone is aware that they're doing that. I think anxiety is kind of the beginning of a lot of that. So if we can hit anxiety first, then it can kind of not create the pathway to the others, or at least create that awareness, because surely anxiety builds into the fear, builds into the response, and that's the place that it starts. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think some people, it's bringing awareness into the situation, and it might be from something you read, or you might see a video, or you might have somebody tell you, and bring your awareness that this is a response to a situation. You're not crazy. You're responding to a situation, either an old situation or a new situation, and there's something that you could do about it. So that is an invitation right away to like start to think about it differently, or bring awareness in a new way. And then often people go looking for more information about how then to bring that awareness in, and they start either journaling and recording that so they could make a different choice. And awareness is everything. So once you have intention to try to bring awareness in and start to bring awareness in, you learn so quickly about yourself and what you could do differently. And then it's a practice. You have to just keep practicing it with lots of compassion, lots of love, support. All the support you could get is great for you too.
I love that you're talking about some things that you can do yourself to start and finding the tools that work for you, but also the need for others. Because sometimes we do need a coach, we need a doctor, we need a counselor, we need someone who can bridge that gap for us of where we can't quite get on our own, or even God for that matter. But also, what you're talking about, I think, is really important for today, for us to realize that we're all human, that we are a common humanity. We have the same struggles. We're not alone, we're not isolated, and we're not different. Somebody else has felt just the way you are or had the same response. And that means there's solutions. And I often think of people who were really resilient or inventors, like with the light bulb and Thomas Edison. How many times did he have to try to get there? But he followed his intuition on his invention that it would work. If he hadn't, where would we be without the light bulb today, for example? And if we can see that potential in our kids as well, of who knows who they can be if we build them the opportunity within themselves to have the strength to navigate this new world and all the opportunities that are there, and to see it that way instead of being curious. What opportunities are here now? Where are the solutions, and how can I contribute?
Yeah, that's great. That is the goal of what we need to do with this generation, because they've just lost sight of it. And I keep mentioning modern conveniences, but we don't have as many chores as we used to have to survive. And so people are out of touch with the fact that they have skills. They
Yeah.
do. They do have skills. They're totally adaptable. I mean, we've adapted for so long, but we haven't really put them into practice. So we're not observing ourselves doing them. So we need our
Mhm.
kids to do hard things, to get to know themselves as skilled, to get them to know themselves as good problem solvers. So we have to encourage them to do hard things. And I think that's really important, so they could see it. They
Yeah.
have to see it with their own eyes, their abilities, and they're not seeing it because they're not challenging themselves, because they have anxiety. And so they back out of anything challenging, try to hold their anxiety off or hold it at bay. And it's the worst thing. A lot of people like quit their jobs or quit their things because they have anxiety. Worst thing you could do, because now you're giving all your attention to the anxiety. And we really need to engage, not give our mind to time or space to the anxiety, because it just feeds itself and gets worse, takes over more and more and more of our brain.
And our social media and the things that you've mentioned aren't helpful to our brain. It's asking us to do quick judgments very quickly. Do I like this or not like this? There's no depth. And so I think another aspect of this is to have the depth of the relationship with yourself and with others, and to question a little bit more of what you see and take the time to go, is that really how I want to feel about it? Do I want to take
Yeah,
that in?
exactly. It's like somebody else is telling us how to feel. I think a lot of it. I know you're saying like we have quick decisions, but mostly we're being told how to feel about it. And so in my book, I do mention, I'm like, go out for a walk and go look at stuff and make a decision what you think about that thing yourself, because we spend so long on our phone with someone telling us how to think about something. Or all the news or everything is spun, right? Any commercial, it's like they want us to think a certain way and they're telling us how to think. So we buy their product, and it's incredible. It's incredible. So we need to start teaching them how to figure stuff out, how to do things, how to interpret things, or decide what they like and what they don't like, off the screens. And I know it's not going away. Like, the phone's not going away. We need to learn how to live with it, but we really need to teach young people what are the consequences, because they could override them if they understood them. And then if they stopped blaming themselves for having anxiety or thinking that they're weak or something, if they stopped spending so much energy on that, then they could spend energy overriding the problems that the phone is causing them, and they could feel better, do better, and feel more resilient, and do great things in the world, which is, that's their birthright.
I think what you're talking about there is outside validation versus inside validation. If they could learn that difference, that would help a lot, because a lot of those messages are saying a lot of things about outside validation, something someone can see, something someone can quantify, a certain look, a certain thing, having this, having that, instead of how I feel. How do I feel on a regular basis? And that I get to make the choice of how I feel, and I need to pay attention to, does the situation feel right for me? Does it not feel right for me? What allows me to stay grounded and centered and within myself? Those are the powerful tools that I think give us the control to create our lives.
Yeah, awesome. That's so true.
Well, thank you so much. Any last thoughts or examples you'd like to share of clients that you've worked with?
Oh gosh, I'm not necessarily prepared for that. But if you have a teen in your life who has anxiety, go grab a copy of my book. Come on over to my YouTube at Dr. Jodi, DoctorJodi, and binge all my videos, and let's see if we could get them better, because that's my goal, is to help young people feel better about themselves. And listen, the same things that are making our kids anxious are making us anxious too. So these ideas are applicable to every age. So parents are reading my books for their kids, but also for themselves. So it's really important information to understand anxiety in a new way, so you could get rid of it, get it out of your life.
And then resiliently thrive forward with your resilient intuition. Thank you so much, Jodi. Thank you, listeners. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Resilient Mother podcast. Take care. I believe in you, believe in yourself, and God bless.